Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Beacon of Light podcast this evening. Tonight, we have an awesome author, and his name is Chris Schallert. And with him, we are going to be really discussing the topic of mental health as well as writing. So if you guys want to get into that, let's first jump into this.
I'm April Tribe Juke. Welcome to the Beacon of Light podcast. I believe we are all made with light, and light is hope. This podcast brings authors who write stories of hope to all of you. Your journey to be inspired and amplified by these stories starts now.
And welcome back. We are so happy to have Chris with us tonight. So, Chris, before we get started into the depths of the book, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. I am a blogger, author, a musician. I consider myself a philosopher and a general creator. I like to examine what it takes to create something that comes out right the first time, or the process it takes to make it right eventually. I'm focused on writing right now, but you can also see on my blogs that I do original music compositions in 3 or 4 different instruments. I have multiple writing projects going. I'm also crafting props for cosplay and friends and making clothes that fit me. And I have 1 wife, 2 cats, a new house, and I generally get by enjoying life by taking it all in and continuing to work and grow even when I'm stuck at work. So that's about me.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love the creation and in many different aspects. In writing, I love the clothes making. That is fantastic. Probably because you're quite tall, correct?
Yes. This
That's
vest
awesome.
is a piece. that
Oh,
I've
look.
made.
Check him out. He is showcasing his vest and all of these great things. He's made great hat as well.
Thank you.
That
I did not
was
make
awesome.
this one.
Oh, he did not make that. Okay. Well, welcome. We are so happy that you are here tonight. And as you've seen on the title, we were trying to kind of look at, we know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And Chris has a very interesting way that, I don't know if this started all of his writing, but he has a little bit of a story to tell. And if anyone read the blog through the week, through yesterday, it's really exciting to kind of see how writing as an author, especially fiction, what can happen to your mental health. So why don't you share a little bit about the beginning of this crush you had in high school? See where we go from there.
So in high school, all of the girls are, they're getting to be women. They're all getting beautiful. But there was one that I had a crush on who didn't even go to my high school. We worked the same night shift at a nearby warehouse. And she was just the most adorable thing. And you could tell she was athletic and she was outgoing and she was very friendly and she was always smiling. And I was just terrified of even approaching her, even if I'd had the opportunity to. So being a high schooler myself, I was dealing with raging hormones. I was dealing with the stress of having moved several times and now starting high school where I knew almost nobody. And then it all just latched onto her. And I tried not to let it happen because I understood that feelings are just feelings. But I also understood that knowing that doesn't make them easier to deal with. So I started writing a story based on several other pieces of story ideas I had. And in this, my main character was modeled after myself, and he had a crush on a girl who was modeled after that girl. But unlike me, he actually had, you could call them magical powers if you want to. It's not exactly magic in the world, unimportant. But he actually had the ability and the opportunity to talk with her like I did not. So that was my way of trying to purge the frustration from myself by writing a story where it was all actually going right. But the story had its own life as well. And even though my character could influence things and things were going well for him, it was not a perfect solution to everything else. And so even as I was healing up and getting better at understanding myself, my emotions, the story took its own life. And following along at that point, I was writing it, but I was also following it, which taught me a lot about character motivations and plot. Following it, I actually learned more about my own emotions and how to deal with them without getting rid of them.
That's really great. Really understanding that as emotions and feelings, they're a part of humanity. And so we can't stuff them aside because major problems happen when that occurs. So allowing a very healthy way, and I would say very normal things. Sometimes we reach so far beyond what we think we can actually do, what's in our control. And I am not saying that it's not like, it is okay if you need to get counseling and other supportive helps, but sometimes in a phase like this, writing things out, and I love how you say you followed along. It's almost like you put out a path and you're like, oh, where's this going? Let's see where this is headed. That's really, really neat, because the idea of how characters develop really can take on a life of its own. And in that creation process, there's just something about it that really helps to move things forward. So really fun. So what is your character's name?
My character's name is Cadence Colo, and his last name becomes more important closer to the end of the story. But he comes from a family of historians, and if you think of somebody who would run the what's the big history museum in New York City?
The Smithsonian? Well, that's in Washington, D.C. Okay, there we go.
That's the one I was thinking of. His family would have been the ones who ran that. So he has very strong family ties and ties to history. And so that's where he gets a lot of his perspective on life from. So that's his general backstory.
Really cool. And I love the idea of history because, right, it is a whole bunch of stories laced together throughout time. And events that happen there really have impact upon our future. So looking at that, I'm sure his perspective really is pretty deep for him to know, okay, based on what happened in this scenario, maybe in the future, something else could come forward. So we have right there running on the ticker underneath, it's called Mather's Odds. So how did you come up with the book title?
It was initially called Cadence and Catherine, after the two main characters. And it stayed that way for a long time until that turned into a section heading for one portion of the story. And Mather's Odds became a term in the universe for something so rare or something so coincidental that somebody must have had a hand in making it happen. And Mathers, I can say this without spoiling much of the story, Mathers were powerful beings years ago who could influence even the outcomes of things. So for someone to say, Mather's odds meant this was designed by someone else. And I kept it as the book title because that ended up being very much the framework of the book.
Wonderfully said. So how many of you have that curiosity out there to wonder, okay, so now you have a great backstory full of depth with a character. Now you have Mather's odds as a great title that carries things forward with that energy to possibly predict things, maybe has some power involved in this. And with fiction, the sky's the limits, right? There are ideas that can just form. And I would love to know, as a writer, have you ever been within a piece of the story and something pops up and suddenly you have to go over here and interview that something that just popped up? And really, it's almost like you become a reporter of your own story. Has that ever happened to you?
That happened in a portion of the story for certain. There were some characters who emerged. One of them was a car technician that worked on his motorcycle. And initially, she was just going to be a sounding board. But then when I was in China, I met a couple old ladies who were just wonderful and spunky and very, very forward. And they became the inspiration for her character, so that I really had to see not what do I want her to say, but what would she say? In another book, one that I have a few last revisions to make before I send it in again to agents, there was a character that I was going to use just to introduce the story. But then he ended up sticking around and becoming very important to many characters involved in the story. He became part of the plot going forward. And every 2 or 3 times he showed up, he had another surprise for me. And I realized he's always been like this. But since I gave him a stage to work with, he started revealing more of himself. And it ends up making more sense because it explains why he was where he was. And it gave me more reasons for him to fill in the spaces that my other character wouldn't have gotten to. So it helped me fill out the story, but I hadn't even outlined his character when I started writing.
Oh, that is so fun when those things happen. So writers out there, if you can identify with these types of things, what happens when we begin to write, it is that creative process where it just allows limitless opportunities for story, for a hero's journey, for adventure, for romance, for so many different things. Because as the characters go forward, there is a way that really shows and reveals fun things that can be added to, and they become more than what maybe like you have explained that you first thought that they would, maybe give just a support or maybe just an intro. And now things are really going forward. Now thinking about that, and with mental health, there's something really important there. We have to be able to kind of get outside of ourselves to understand more of ourselves. Sometimes that doesn't make a lot of sense, but really, if we get into a cycle, usually this cycle starts to pull us downward. And when you can come out and write like you did as a high schooler and put this energy, emotion, fear, worry, whatever was happening there within a character, it's almost like you've built a 3D model and you can walk around it and kind of examine it. You can interview it. You can have this whole concept, and you become, I think, more wise. Like there's just a thing for it. So writers out there, it is such an incredible tool. And I know with May, again, being Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm constantly encouraging people to write, because once they see it there, read it again, they have just a great perspective. Is there anything you've written, Christopher, that following your writing, you maybe have left it alone because of other projects that have popped up and you want to get back to it? And then when you return, how does it feel? Does it feel like an old friend? Does it make you laugh? Can you see your growth? Tell me a little bit about that, if that's an experience that's ever happened to you.
A piece of writing that I come back to and I realize I've grown. Well, there's always Mather's Odds, which is a few years old in print by now. If there was one other thing, I would say I have grown as I came back to it. It's actually a 12-book project that I am working on right now. And that world began also back in high school after playing some video games and thinking, well, if there were a prequel to this game, how would this work out? How would that work out? And I ended up creating a whole place called Realm. And I tried writing a larger story in it several times. And each time I got to understand the characters better because I understood how to follow them instead of giving them orders. And so I can see portions now in the original draft that make me cringe because I say that was very forced. It didn't feel like it naturally came from the character, which taught me in time that if I want my characters to behave a certain way, I need to design them so that they behave a certain way. So that's the most present example I have of coming back to a project and realizing that I have actually grown and I understand how to let people be people instead of ordering them what to do, and still finding a way to fit them into the story.
Yeah, that's really, really a great example of that. And within our growth, there, I like how you said cringe moment, because there are those things. And I think it's really good. Time with writing really can add great thing. I think it's similar to how cheese ages or maybe how wine ages, because it allows time for our minds to get to a new perspective, maybe a new place, maybe just a better opportunity, or maybe with more emotion and more passion, or whatever the case may be. And when we come back, it's not a scratch over and start over. It's an add to and a possible freeing from. I like how you say following your characters to see where they take you, because I often wonder about the great books as we read several times and we're exposed to as children, and the classics. What makes it a classic? Why do we want to return and to read these stories again and again? And it is that character. There is a piece there that speaks to someone's heart, that captures it, or the villain that you just you want to wring its neck, right? And they're so scary, so evil that you just think, how could you do that? And then there are times when I think of authors who've written things that are very powerful or very dark. Maybe the villain is so dark, you think, I wonder if they're okay. Hope they didn't experience any of that growing up. Whoa, there's some times where you think, wow. And our minds can really get into the depths of things. As a teacher, I love stories, and we share with my special education students different aspects on different books that they might not be able to read for themselves. But wow, when they listen to them, they piece things together that are great. And it's awesome to see. We have a villain right now who's pretty awful. And to see them like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And it's fun to see them really experience story at such a depth that they might not have been able to just because of a reading ability. But this coming in, wow, they just open right up, and it is so fun. And then we can add pieces of that character through the day. Like, I wonder how so-and-so would think about this. See these little light bulbs pop up in their head in the classroom, and it is so fun. And I feel like I'm a reporter every day, like gathering evidence and all of this. It's such fun. So in writing fiction, you say you have a 12 series book project. Wow, all based on an idea that came from a prequel idea of a game, Realm, correct? So give us kind of a timeline on this, and how are things going with this story?
Well, two weekends ago, I put the finishing touches on the first draft of the first book, and I'm planning to write every other month after I finish one of the novels, start the next one. I needed to get this one down, and I'm finally satisfied with it, because like you need a square foundation for your house so that the rest of the house goes up straight, I needed a good foundation for this set of characters. So I wrote the first draft of the first book maybe 15 years ago. And I rewrote it 5 years ago. And I edited that version 2 years ago. And then I said, I'm not actually grown enough in my skills to write this. So I took time away from that project to do smaller projects, a larger fan fiction on my blog, a few short original screenplays, 10-minute plays, short stories, to understand how to make characters for a long story. I also read a few larger books to see how they set up their characters. I did a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of essay writing based on articles that I had read about character development. And so back in February of this year, I said, I'm going to write this again now that I am a much better, more experienced writer. And it came together in a month and a half, so 6 weeks. And I'm in the middle of taking off a month to let it settle and work on some other projects for fun. And then I'll start writing the next one, which will take me ideally about 6 weeks. Then another month off, and so on and so forth, which means that I'll finish it in about 2.5 years. The last book will come out. But I have all of the books outlined. I have all of the character arcs set up. I finally understand character design that lets the characters drive the story forward on their own without needing me to tell them where to go. So that whole book series should be done in its first draft form in 2025, probably in time for Christmas. Hopefully by then too, I will have a publisher and an editor and all that as well.
Wow, fantastic. I love how much research and time you put into character understanding, because characters drive how things are going to happen. And sometimes we take advantage of the possibility that the adventure or the plot will push them through. But if you have a shallow character, they will skip off just like a skipping rock, as opposed to sink into the depth and understanding. And good writing and good writers get it. And that is something I think there's a piece of human understanding and study that they do themselves that adds the depth of the characters. And when you can appeal and understand what it is that they're saying in the way that's an emotional connection, fiction can really heal, drive you to creation, give you ideas that help you to find solutions that you might not have thought of. And I just love the idea that through story, we connect together. So this has been an awesome opportunity. So let's talk briefly here before we close about Mather's Odds. And you say it is available. It's up on Amazon.
Yes.
And so share with us what is the best way to get a hold of this book. You can see running on the ticker underneath. Is there anything there with the WordPress site? Share with us a little bit more about how we can get a hold of you and maybe see the progress even of this next set of books.
Well, in the blog post on your site related to this video, you put in my writing resources page, which is where you'll see me do reviews on the different bits and pieces of advice I find to tell you not what's good or what's bad, but to help you see what tools are helpful for what projects. And that site should also link back to the other one, the Gestaltic Ocean, which was not the best title, but I've stuck with it. And there you will be able to find a link to my book. You can purchase it on Amazon. There's an audiobook version on Audible. I narrated it myself. That was fun, actually. Hardcover, softcover, and then you can leave me messages there. You can subscribe. You can leave comments on different blog posts. If you find something helpful, leave a comment there and let me know if you want to hear more about it. And right now I'm just doing a big, broad overview of different resources. But I can do deeper dives into anything that people want to know about. But on both sites, you'll see me often comment about how I used a certain lesson when I was writing Mather's Odds, or how I discovered that this was somehow in the book's design, even though I hadn't intended it. So it's showing how even a novice writer can understand some things about the craft of making stories. So I reference Mather's Odds quite a bit. There are some free clips from the pre-publication editings, and you can sample my writing. There are some pages that you can read for free at the Amazon site. And besides that, I'm on Twitter, but I just link to my blog posts there, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I do most of my stuff through my blogs. So those are the best ways to follow me, and there should be a contact me page on both of them if you ever want to know more. And I'm constantly working on updating the materials I have, the topics that I cover, and those are about the best ways to get in contact with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christopher. This has been a great thing. So make sure you go to Amazon, grab Mather's Odds, and have a bit of an adventure. And remember, this character came because it helped him to solve a challenge that he had in his early life. And that is something that is really, really awesome. So thank you again for being a wonderful guest. Please, everyone, go back. You can read through the blog. Check it out there. Like, comment. Thank you for being here. We see a lot of good YouTube subscribers popping up. Make sure that you subscribe, like, and ring that bell. Thank you again for being a part of the Beacon of Light podcast. Again, head over to Amazon for Mather's Odds. And thank you again, Christopher. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. We'll see you all